My name is Ayesha Siddiqui, and I live in a city called Chicago, in the heart of America. I am 34 years old, born to immigrant parents who fled their home country in search of a better life, just like so many others who come here. My father is a devout man, and my mother, her spirit is as strong as iron, yet her hands are soft, always there to comfort and guide me. We came from Pakistan when I was just a little girl, and though I don't remember much of the early days, I remember the stories of how they struggled. They sacrificed so much for me, and I had always known their faith was their anchor. I carry that faith too, or at least I thought I did. I work at a small but cozy bakery in the downtown area. It's not much, just a place where I knead dough, decorate cakes, and serve pastries with a smile, but it's enough to make ends meet. I'm grateful for it because it gives me purpose, and I get to meet people who, like me, are seeking something in life, however simple it may be. But my life is not simple. I have been married for 10 years to a man named Zaid. When I met him, he was everything I thought I needed. A strong, charming, ambitious man who held a good job in a finance firm with a bright future ahead of him. He was kind and loving, especially in the beginning. I remember how he would hold my hand during our walks in the park, talk about dreams, our future children, and the house we would one day own. He had me convinced that the life we built together would be full of joy and meaning. But over the years, something began to change. It wasn't immediate, but it was noticeable. Zaid's temper grew darker, his laughter became fewer, and his workdays started stretching longer. I thought it was just the stress of the job, but as the days passed, I began to see the signs. He started drinking. It was just a drink here and there at first, what seemed like innocent gatherings with his colleagues after work. I told myself that I should be supportive, that it was just a phase, and that I had to trust him. But one drink led to 2, then 3, and before I knew it, he was coming home drunk more nights than not. I began to feel the weight of his moods, his temper, his anger, the belittling remarks he made when I would ask him if everything was all right. His hand would sometimes hit the table or the walls, and I would flinch. But he would apologize the next day, promising that he was sorry, that he had no control over it. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. After all, we were married, and the sanctity of marriage in our faith is something we hold so dearly. Divorce was never an option for me. It was forbidden in my heart. Our faith, Islam, teaches that marriage is a sacred bond, and under no circumstances should one abandon the other. I had been raised with that belief: loyalty, patience, and submission to God's will. I began to suffer in silence. The bruises were hidden under long sleeves, the sadness masked behind a forced smile. My family, though loving, didn't know the truth. My friends saw the perfect couple, the couple who shared faith, love, and respect. But inside, I felt like I was drowning. Zaid's drinking got worse, and so did his outbursts. He would yell, sometimes break things, and then there were the nights when he would hit me. It started with small slaps that he would excuse as accidents or misunderstandings. But over time, the slaps grew harder, more frequent, and the pain was something I could no longer hide. I didn't know who I was anymore. Was I the wife he once loved, or had I become someone who deserved this treatment? Still, I never considered leaving, not because I didn't deserve better, but because I feared what would happen if I did. My parents would be disappointed. My community would talk behind my back. I would be judged for not holding up my end of the sacred vow I had made. But in all of this, there were moments of hope. Moments when the man I married would return, even if just for a few hours, and he would apologize profusely, tell me that he loved me, and promise to change. He would get on his knees, say that he was sorry for all the pain he had caused. He would cry, and I would forgive him. For a moment, everything would feel normal again. For a moment, I thought maybe this time it would be different, but it never was. The darkness always came back, and so the cycle continued. The pain, the apologies, the lies, the love, all tangled together in a twisted mess that I could not escape. But then, something happened that would change everything. One night, Zaid came home later than usual, more drunk than I had ever seen him. He stumbled through the door, yelling at me for no reason at all, calling me names I couldn't even repeat. His eyes were wild, his breath sour, and in that moment, I saw the man I once loved reduced to a stranger I didn't recognize. He was no longer the man who held my hand in the park, but a person whose anger consumed everything in his path. I begged him to stop, begged him to look at me, to see me, his wife, the woman who loved him despite everything. But the rage took over, and before I could blink, he hit me across the face, harder than ever before. I fell to the ground, and for a moment, everything went black. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but when I woke up, I was lying on the cold tile floor, my head throbbing, my vision blurred. Zaid was still standing over me, but now he looked worried. He knelt beside me, shaking me, calling my name. Ayesha, please. I didn't mean to. Please wake up. His voice was no longer full of rage, but filled with panic. But even in that moment, I felt something I couldn't quite explain. A coldness in the pit of my stomach. A certainty that this wasn't the end, that there was more, so much more to this life than what I had been enduring. The pain, the confusion, and the anger all seemed to dissolve as I stared into his desperate eyes. And then, without warning, the world around me shifted. A blinding light filled the room, and I felt myself being lifted from the floor. Zaid's voice faded away, and my body seemed to float, weightless, surrounded by nothing but light and a feeling of peace I had never known before. Where was I? What was happening? I was no longer in my home, no longer on that cold tile floor. I felt suspended in a space of pure light, surrounded by a presence so overwhelmingly beautiful that words could not describe it. It was as if every cell in my body was alive, vibrating with energy, filled with love. There was no pain, no fear, no sadness. And then I heard a voice, soft, gentle, yet filled with authority. Ayesha, it said, do not be afraid. I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't move. The voice spoke again, this time with more clarity. You are not alone. You are seen and you are loved, but you have much to learn. It wasn't a voice I recognized. It wasn't a voice from this world, and yet I felt a deep, undeniable connection to it. I felt safe. I opened my eyes, or at least I thought I did, and before me stood a figure. At first, I couldn't make out the details, but then the image grew clearer. A man of such beauty, such grace, that I couldn't look at him without feeling overwhelmed by the purest form of love I had ever known. Who are you? I whispered, though the words didn't seem to come from my mouth. I am Jesus, the man replied. His voice, soft and filled with compassion, echoed in my mind. And I am here because you are at a crossroads, Ayesha. The words hit me like a shockwave. Jesus. The name that I had heard of in passing, in stories, in the teachings of others, but never had I known him like this. Never had I imagined he would speak to me. His presence was gentle but firm, like a father who loved his child deeply, yet knew the time had come to speak truth. You have been living in the shadows, my child. He said. You have been hurt, but you have also hurt. You have been holding on to a life that is not yours to carry. His words washed over me, and for the first time I felt the truth of them deep within my soul. I had been living in the shadows, holding on to something that had long passed its time. My marriage, my faith, my fear. I had been blinded by them all. And in that moment, I understood. I was at a crossroads. I didn't know where this path would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. My life as I knew it had just been shattered. I don't know how long I was in that place, or if time even existed there. It was as though the concept of time didn't matter, as though I was suspended in a moment that stretched infinitely. But with every breath, I felt my soul being pulled deeper into something I couldn't fully understand. The light around me, so pure and brilliant, made everything else fade away. The hurt, the confusion, the overwhelming despair of my marriage, it all seemed so distant now, as though it were a different life, one I had lived but no longer recognized. Jesus stood before me, his face radiant, his eyes filled with compassion and sorrow. He knew me better than I knew myself. There was no hiding, no pretending. Everything I had tried to bury, the secrets, the lies, the pain, it was all laid bare before him, and still, he loved me. There was no condemnation in his gaze, no judgment, just a profound understanding. He knew the struggles I had faced, the choices I had made, and the weight of the vows I had tried so desperately to uphold. You have been walking in darkness, Ayesha, he said, his voice as tender as a whisper, but you do not have to walk this path alone. I wanted to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I was overwhelmed with so many emotions, grief, shame, hope, and love. I had always known about God's mercy, but never had I experienced it in such an intimate, tangible way. My whole life had been a series of struggles to please him, to follow his commands, but I had never understood the depth of his love for me until now. You feel abandoned, Ayesha, he continued, as if reading the very depths of my heart. You feel alone in your suffering, but I have always been with you. A tear slipped from my eye, not out of sadness, but from the sheer weight of this realization. I had spent years questioning my worth, wondering if God had forsaken me, asking why he had allowed such pain to persist in my life. I had been trapped in the cycle of abuse, and no matter how hard I prayed, no matter how many times I asked for help, I felt as though my prayers went unanswered. But now, in this realm of light, I understood. My prayers had been heard all along. He extended his hand to me, a gesture of pure love and invitation. You are not forsaken, he said, and you never have been. It is time to let go of the chains that bind you. It is time to embrace the truth that I have always been with you, and I will guide you into the light. I reached out, not knowing what would happen next, but knowing I had no choice but to trust him. As soon as my hand touched his, a surge of energy coursed through me, like a wave of warmth and peace washing over my entire being. It was unlike anything I had ever felt. It was as if every hurt, every doubt, every fear was being lifted from my shoulders, replaced by an overwhelming sense of love and grace. Do you see, Ayesha? Jesus asked softly, his voice gentle yet powerful. This is what I offer you. Not just salvation, but a new life, a life where you are no longer a prisoner to your past. I looked around, and the space we were in began to shift. The blinding light that had surrounded me faded, and in its place, I saw images, visions of my life. But they were not the life I had lived in pain. These were scenes of me in peace, in joy, in a world where I was free from the chains of abuse and fear. I saw myself walking in the park with Zaid. Only this time, he was smiling, his face not clouded with anger, but full of warmth and love. We were laughing together, holding hands, like the couple we had once been. But then the vision shifted, and I saw something darker. I saw myself trapped in a house of shadows, the walls closing in around me as Zaid's anger consumed him, as the cycle of abuse repeated itself. But this time, something was different. I saw myself stepping out of that cycle, walking away from the darkness and into the light. I saw myself standing tall, no longer afraid to speak the truth, no longer afraid to seek help, no longer afraid to choose freedom. You must choose, Jesus said, his voice soft yet firm. You must choose to live in the light, even when it means walking away from what you have known, even when it means losing what you thought was your life. The weight of his words pressed down on me, and I felt a deep stirring within my soul. I had always believed that marriage was a sacred bond, that love required endurance through the darkest times, but Jesus was showing me something new, something that my faith had not prepared me for. Do you believe in my power to heal, Ayesha? He asked. Do you believe that you can be free from the darkness? I nodded, not because I had all the answers, but because deep down, I knew that he was right. I had been trapped for so long in my own pain, so afraid to break free, so afraid of what others would think. But now in this moment, I realized that my faith was not meant to keep me in a cage of suffering. It was meant to set me free. I believe, I whispered. And in that moment, I felt a rush of peace flood my heart. The visions around me faded, and I found myself standing in a new place, back in my home. But this time it was different. The darkness that had once filled these walls was gone. The air was light, fresh, and clean. I looked down at my hands, and they were no longer bruised. The pain, the fear, the shame, it was all gone. I was free. But the journey was far from over. I woke up with a start, my breath shallow and my body trembling. For a brief moment, I didn't know where I was. The weight of my past, the bruises, the shame, the suffocating silence flooded back in, threatening to drown me. But as I blinked against the darkness of the night, something was different. I was different. The room around me was familiar, the bed warm, and yet the air felt lighter. My mind was clouded with questions, yet there was a peace that lingered, a peace that hadn't been there before. I couldn't explain what had happened. The experience with Jesus felt too real to be just a dream, too vivid to dismiss as fantasy. The visions, the warmth, the love I had felt, how could that have been anything but real? I had heard stories of near-death experiences, people who saw lights and felt peace, but I had never experienced anything like that before. And then I remembered the question he had asked me, the challenge that he had given me. Do you believe in my power to heal? I had said yes, and with that, something had shifted within me, something that could never be undone. But as the morning light began to creep through the blinds, I realized that my journey had only just begun. Zaid was asleep next to me, his body sprawled out in the bed, a deep snore escaping his lips. I studied him for a moment, the man I had loved and married, the man who had hurt me so many times. My heart twisted with a mix of sorrow and compassion. He didn't deserve what had happened to him, the anger that had consumed him, the addiction that had destroyed him. But neither did I. I had believed for so long that I was bound to him by faith, that no matter how much he hurt me, I had to endure it. That was the teaching I had grown up with, the message I had internalized. Marriage is sacred. You must endure. You must submit. But what if that was wrong? What if endurance didn't mean sacrificing my soul, my peace, and my life? The memories of the visions Jesus had shown me flickered through my mind like fragments of a broken mirror. The park, the joy, the laughter, those moments were possible. But then, the darkness that loomed over me, the cycle of violence and fear, that was not the life he had wanted for me. It was not the life he had envisioned when he spoke those words of love to me. But there was another part of me, a voice that whispered doubt, that feared change. Would anyone believe me if I told them what had happened? Would they understand the transformation I had experienced, or would they call it a lie, a delusion, a weakness? I tried to push the thoughts away, but they lingered like shadows in the corners of my mind. I glanced at Zaid again, his face so peaceful in his sleep, and I felt the tug of loyalty to the vows I had made. For better or worse, I had lived the worst, but could I really walk away from the man I had once vowed to love, to serve, to honor? Could I leave him when he was clearly struggling, when he needed me more than ever? And yet, I couldn't ignore the truth that Jesus had revealed to me. I was not meant to live in fear. I was not meant to be a prisoner in my own home. I stood up slowly, my legs shaky from the surreal weight of the experience. The room spun for a moment, and I had to steady myself on the dresser before I could move. I walked quietly to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, hoping to ground myself in reality. But the reality was different now. The truth was clearer. I couldn't unsee what I had seen. What was I supposed to do now? How was I supposed to navigate this new path? As I dried my face, my eyes fell on the small Quran on the shelf in the bathroom. It had always been a source of comfort, a reminder of God's wisdom and guidance. But today, it seemed distant, as though the words on those pages no longer held the answers I had once believed in. I had always viewed my faith as a fortress, a stronghold that would protect me. But now, it felt as though I was being called to step out of the fortress, to walk into the unknown, and to trust in something beyond my understanding. God, help me, I whispered. Show me what to do. The words felt small, insignificant, but in that moment, I realized something profound. I had always prayed for strength, for guidance, for answers, but I had never truly asked to be free. Free from the expectations of others, free from the chains of my own fear and doubt, free from the toxic patterns that had governed my marriage. Zaid stirred behind me, and I knew I couldn't stay in this moment of reflection forever. There was a decision to be made, one that would shape the rest of my life. When I returned to the bedroom, Zaid was awake, his eyes clouded with confusion as he looked at me. The weight of the years we had spent together, the years of abuse, of silence, of struggling in the darkness, hung heavily between us. Ayesha? He said softly, his voice hoarse. Are you okay? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his question settle deep within me. Are you okay? I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing. I couldn't continue to live in a way that dishonored who I was, who I had become, and who I was meant to be. I'm not sure anymore, Zaid, I said, my voice shaking. I don't know if I can keep living this way. I don't know if I can keep pretending. The words hung in the air like a confession, and I could feel his gaze piercing through me. He didn't speak, but I could see the shift in his eyes, the confusion, the fear, the understanding that something had changed. What are you saying? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, but I have to find out, I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned away from him then, unable to meet his gaze any longer. I couldn't make this decision for him. I could only make it for myself. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a choice. The power to shape my destiny no longer lay in the hands of my past, my marriage, or my fears. It lay within me. And with that, I stepped into the unknown, trusting that God, or whatever force had guided me in that moment of divine revelation, would show me the way. I had taken the first step, but the path ahead was still shrouded in uncertainty. For years, I had walked through life with my eyes closed, believing that the right thing to do was always to endure, to suppress my own voice, and to never question the vows I had made before God. The world around me had been filled with layers of guilt and shame, reinforced by the voices of others who told me that a wife must submit, that enduring pain was part of the sacrifice of love. But that voice, the one that had whispered in my ear in that divine encounter, was louder now, more insistent. I couldn't keep ignoring the truth that had been revealed to me. I wasn't just a wife, I was a woman, a person, with my own needs, my own heart, and my own right to live in peace. But now, I faced the hardest decision I had ever had to make. How do you walk away from a life you've built, even when you know that life is toxic? As the days passed, I felt a mixture of dread and clarity. I wasn't sure what would happen next. Would Zaid understand? Would he hate me for what I had to do? Would my community abandon me, seeing me as a failure for not sticking by my husband, for not enduring through the hardship? The pressure to keep up appearances, to maintain the sanctity of my marriage at all costs, weighed heavily on me. I could feel the eyes of everyone around me, the expectations of my family and friends, and the judgment that would come if I made the wrong decision. But even in the midst of those fears, the memory of that encounter with Jesus lingered like a balm on my heart. It was as though I had been pulled out of the darkness and shown the light, and now I had to find a way to step into it fully. It felt like a test of my faith in God's plan, of my willingness to trust that His love for me was not conditional, not based on my suffering, but on my faith and my freedom. That morning, as the sun broke through the curtains and bathed the room in golden light, I realized something important. I wasn't being asked to leave Zaid because I didn't love him, or because he didn't deserve forgiveness. I was being asked to choose myself, my soul, my well-being, my future. The pain of leaving him was overwhelming, yes, but the fear of staying and losing myself completely was far worse. I turned over the possibility in my mind for several days. I needed to confront Zaid. I needed to tell him the truth, no matter how hard it was. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine, that I was okay. It would have been so much easier to keep my head down, to keep enduring, to live a quiet life of suffering in silence. But that wasn't the life I had been shown in the divine realm. I had seen peace, and I had seen light, and those things were meant for me too. When the moment finally came, I was shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. Zaid sat across from me, his eyes filled with confusion, perhaps even fear. He had always been able to sense when something was wrong, but this time I wasn't sure what he was expecting. Maybe he thought I would just forgive him again, that I would go on living in the same cycle of pain and silence. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "I don't know how to say this, Zaid," I began, my voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with each word. "But I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. I've tried for so long to hold on to our marriage, to believe that things would get better. But nothing changes. I'm losing myself in all of this. I don't recognize who I've become, and I don't recognize who you've become either." Zaid looked at me, his face a mixture of disbelief and anger. "What are you saying, Ayesha?" he demanded. "Are you saying that you're going to leave me? After everything we've been through? After all these years?" I took a deep breath, my hands trembling in my lap. "I'm saying that I can't keep living like this anymore. I can't keep allowing myself to be destroyed by the darkness, by the pain. I have to find myself again, Zaid. I have to live for me, not just for you." For a long moment, Zaid just stared at me, his expression hardening as though trying to process what I had said. The silence between us was deafening, heavy with everything we had experienced together. I could see the hurt in his eyes, the confusion, but I also saw something else, a flicker of understanding. "Ayesha?" he began slowly, his voice quieter now, filled with a sadness I hadn't heard before. You really want to leave me after everything we've been through? Yes, I whispered, feeling the finality of my decision deep in my bones. I do, because I can't stay in a relationship that is slowly killing me. I have to choose life, Zaid. I have to choose peace. He didn't say anything more after that. The room felt cold, distant, as though the very air between us had changed. I had spoken my truth, and there was no going back now. That evening, I packed my things. Nothing extravagant, just the essentials. I felt a strange calmness in the midst of the chaos. This was the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was also the most freeing. The more I packed, the more I felt as though I was shedding a skin I had outgrown, a life that no longer fit. The next few days were a blur. I stayed with a friend from the mosque who offered me a safe space while I figured out what to do next. My heart ached as I thought about the life I had left behind, but I couldn't ignore the overwhelming peace that was slowly replacing the fear in my heart. I knew that this was the right decision, even if the road ahead was uncertain. And then came the confrontation that I had feared. My community. I had always been a part of the mosque, always tried to live according to the teachings of Islam. I had respected the traditions, prayed 5 times a day, and done everything I thought was expected of me. But now, as I stood before the women of the community, I felt their eyes on me. Eyes that didn't see the new me, the woman who had found her voice and her strength, but the woman who had failed. Ayesha, one of the elders said, her voice tinged with judgment. What has happened? You're leaving your husband? Is that really what a good wife does? I swallowed hard, but my voice didn't waver. I am doing what I must to protect my soul. I can't live in fear anymore. I can't stay in a marriage that has broken me. I believe that God has shown me a different way, a way where I can live in peace. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the disappointment in their eyes, the quiet condemnation, but also something else, something softer, as though they too recognized the truth in my words. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to apologize for my choices. I was finally free. The days that followed were a mix of liberation and isolation. I had stepped out of the suffocating grip of my past life, but I was now walking in a world that felt unfamiliar. The familiar faces of the mosque, my family and my friends, had shifted into something distant, something I no longer belonged to. Some of them tried to reach out, offering words of encouragement, but others were cold, disapproving. It felt like I was on the edge of 2 worlds, neither fully embracing me. But there was also a newfound clarity, a lightness in my heart that I had not felt before. I had made the right decision. I could feel it with every beat of my heart, even though the fear and doubt still lingered at the edges of my mind. Every day felt like a new beginning, even as I faced the harsh realities of living alone, without the man who had been my life for so long. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what had happened, the encounter in the spiritual realm, the voice of Jesus, the overwhelming love I had felt. I knew, deep in my soul, that I couldn't ignore what had been shown to me. I couldn't unsee the truth, the love, and the peace that had surrounded me in that moment. But at the same time, I was caught in a whirlwind of conflict. I was a Muslim woman, born and raised in a devout Muslim family. I had always believed in the teachings of Islam, and yet, here I was, questioning everything. The voice of Jesus was still alive in my heart, and I couldn't shake the feeling that God had revealed something to me that I was meant to understand, even if it was difficult to reconcile with the faith I had known my whole life. I found solace in quiet moments of prayer, but now, my prayers were different. They weren't the rigid recitations I had memorized over the years. They were raw, personal conversations with God, asking for guidance, for understanding, and for peace. I no longer felt the need to ask for forgiveness for every mistake I had made. I simply asked for wisdom and the courage to follow the truth wherever it led. One evening, as I sat in the small living room of the apartment I had moved into, I found myself staring out of the window. The sky was a soft shade of pink, and the streets below were quiet, almost peaceful. It was a stark contrast to the chaos I had lived in for so long. For the first time in years, I felt free. I felt a deep, abiding peace that I had never known before. And then, as I sat there in the stillness, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a woman I had never met before, a stranger, but there was something familiar about her presence. She had an air of quiet grace, as though she had known hardship, and yet had found a way to rise above it. She smiled gently, and for a moment, I felt a connection, something beyond words, beyond explanation. "Ayesha?" she asked softly, her voice kind yet firm. "Yes," I replied, uncertain of why she was here. "I've been sent to speak with you," she said, her eyes searching mine. "I know you are struggling. I can see the pain, the confusion, but I also know that you are on the path to something greater, something that will bring you peace. You are not alone." Her words struck me deeply, but I didn't understand. Who was she? Why was she here? "I don't know what you mean," I said slowly, my heart racing. "You've been shown the truth, Ayesha," she continued, her voice steady. "But the path you must walk is not easy. You will face challenges, doubts, and opposition, but you will also find that the love of God is greater than anything you have known. It is a love that transcends all boundaries, all religions, all divisions. It is a love that heals, that transforms." Tears welled up in my eyes as her words hit home. It felt like she was speaking directly to the core of my being, to the very part of me that had been awakened in that divine encounter. I felt the weight of the truth in her words, the overwhelming love that she spoke of, and I knew, deep in my heart, that she was right. But I was afraid. Afraid of what this new truth meant for my identity, my family, and my future. "I don't know if I can keep going like this," I whispered. "I feel torn between my faith, my past, and the new truth that has been shown to me. What am I supposed to do?" The woman stepped forward, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. "You must trust in the love of God, Ayesha. Trust that He is with you, guiding you. You are not being asked to abandon your faith, but to embrace it fully, without fear, without doubt. The love of God is not confined to any one religion. It is universal, eternal." Her words resonated deep within me, and for the first time since my encounter with Jesus, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. It was as though the chaos of my mind had settled, and I could see the path ahead more clearly. "I don't know how to explain this," I said, my voice shaky, "but I feel like something is pulling me, something greater than myself. I've seen the truth, and now I don't know how to live with it. How do I reconcile my faith with what I've been shown?" The woman smiled, her eyes filled with compassion. "You don't have to have all the answers, Ayesha. Just trust that God will lead you. The truth will unfold in its own time. All you have to do is keep moving forward in faith, knowing that His love will guide you every step of the way." And with that, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the quiet evening. I stood there for a long time, her words echoing in my mind. In the days that followed, I began to embrace the truth I had been shown. I no longer feared the uncertainty of my journey. I had been given a gift, a new understanding of God's love, and I would not let it slip away. But the road ahead was still fraught with challenges. My family, my community, and even my own heart would question what I had seen and experienced. But I knew, deep in my soul, that I was on the right path. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly living, for myself, for my soul, and for the peace that had been promised to me. The days that followed were not as peaceful as I had hoped. Yes, there was peace in my heart, a quiet certainty that I was on the right path, but the world around me was not as kind. The silence I had once found so comforting now seemed suffocating, as though I were a foreigner in a land that had once been my home. I had hoped for understanding. I had hoped that the people closest to me, my family, my friends, my community, would accept the changes I had gone through. But instead, I found myself at odds with them. My parents were the first to notice. The changes in me were impossible to ignore. They had watched me suffer in silence for so many years, and now here I was, different, more peaceful, but also more distant. I wasn't the same woman who had been so devout in her prayers, so obedient in her marriage. My mother was the first to confront me. It was late one evening, and I was sitting at the kitchen table, lost in thought, when she entered the room. Her face was tight, a mixture of worry and confusion. "Ayesha," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "you've changed. I don't know what's going on with you, but I feel like I'm losing my daughter." I looked up at her, the words catching in my throat. "Mama, I haven't gone anywhere," I replied softly. "I'm still here. I'm just trying to find my way, that's all." She shook her head, her eyes brimming with concern. No, it's more than that. I can feel it. You don't pray the way you used to. You don't talk about the things we used to talk about, and I can't understand why. I hesitated, unsure of how to explain. How could I tell her that I had seen Jesus? That I had been shown a love that transcended everything I had ever known? How could I explain that I had felt the presence of something greater than anything I had been taught? I'm still praying, Mama, I finally said. But my prayers are different. I've experienced something that has changed me, and I don't know how to make sense of it yet. Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment there was a sharp edge to her voice. Ayesha, you know we do not stray from the path of Islam. This is a test from God, and you must return to the right way. Whatever you've experienced, it was not from God. I fear you have lost your way. I felt the weight of her words press down on me, and a wave of guilt swept over me. But I also felt a quiet strength deep within me, something that told me that what I had experienced was real, that the love I had felt was not something I could ignore. I'm not abandoning my faith, Mama, I said, my voice trembling. But I'm learning to see God in a way I never have before. I'm not turning away from Islam, but I can't ignore the love I felt. I don't know how to explain it, but it's real. She stepped back, her face softening, but the sadness in her eyes remained. I pray that you find your way back, Ayesha. I pray that you don't lose yourself in this confusion. She left the room, and I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty space where she had stood. My heart ached with the weight of her words, but a part of me knew that I had already stepped onto a path that could not be undone. I couldn't unsee the truth. I couldn't forget the overwhelming love that had been shown to me. The following days were filled with tension. I was becoming more and more isolated. The community I had once been a part of now seemed distant. I would go to the mosque, but I felt like an outsider, as though I no longer belonged. I was still trying to reconcile my new beliefs with the faith I had grown up with, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being torn between two worlds. And then, one day, I received a message from an old friend. Fatima had been one of my closest companions growing up, but we had drifted apart over the years. I hadn't spoken to her since I moved out of my husband's home, and I had no idea what to expect. When I saw her name on my phone, I felt a mix of excitement and fear. I answered the call, my heart pounding. Ayesha? Fatima's voice was filled with warmth. I've been thinking about you. I've heard what's been happening, and I just wanted to check in. Are you okay? Tears welled up in my eyes as I heard the concern in her voice. I don't know anymore, Fatima. I feel so lost. My family doesn't understand, and I don't know how to explain everything I've been through. I've seen something that's changed me, and I don't know what to do with it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then Fatima spoke softly. Ayesha, I know you've been through a lot, but whatever it is you're going through, you have to know that God sees you. He understands the struggle of your heart, and He will guide you even when it feels like you're walking alone. I wiped my tears and took a deep breath. I don't know if I can go back to the way things were. I've been shown something so much greater, something that feels like truth to me, but I'm afraid that everyone will turn away from me. Ayesha, Fatima said, her voice firm yet compassionate. The road you're on might be hard, but remember, God is with you, and there are others who are on this path too. You're not alone. Her words brought a sense of comfort, but I knew she was right. The road ahead was not going to be easy. I would face rejection, confusion, and doubt from the people I loved most. But I had already seen the truth, and nothing could take that away from me. I was being asked to choose between the life I had known and the new path that was being revealed to me. The choice was not easy, and there were days when I wanted to give up, to return to the familiar, to the safe. But deep within me, I knew that I couldn't. I had seen the truth. I had seen love, and I had been called to walk a new path. The following weeks were filled with turbulence. On the outside, everything seemed like it was falling apart. I was a daughter, a sister, a member of a community, and yet I no longer fit neatly into those roles. I felt like a stranger in my own life. My family continued to look at me with concern, disappointment, and confusion. My mother, once a comforting presence, had become a figure of sorrow. I knew that her heart broke every time she saw me, and I felt it deeply. She had hoped for my return to the life we both knew, the life that she had carefully cultivated for me, where faith and family were the center. But I could no longer go back. My father, a stoic man of tradition, had stopped speaking to me altogether. I was no longer the daughter he could boast about in front of his friends, the one who made him proud by following the path of Islam with unwavering commitment. To him, I was a disappointment, a daughter who had strayed, who had fallen for something that was not Islam, not the truth he had lived by. His silence was heavy, suffocating. It felt like the weight of his judgment was a constant pressure on my chest. But there was also something else, something that grew within me in those lonely, painful days. It was a strength, a quiet courage that I had never known I had. It was as though every moment of fear, every word of condemnation, only served to deepen my resolve. The path I was walking was not an easy one. It was marked with rejection, isolation, and doubt, but it was also illuminated by a love that had never left me since my encounter with Jesus. That love was my guide, my anchor, and my hope. I had spent many nights praying, asking God to show me the way. I had asked for clarity, for wisdom, for peace. And slowly, in those moments of quiet surrender, I began to understand that God had not abandoned me. He was with me, even in my doubts, even in my confusion. The love I had felt in that spiritual realm was not an illusion. It was real. It was a love that transcended everything I had known before, and it was that love that had opened my eyes to a greater truth. One evening, as I sat alone in my small apartment, the weight of everything pressing down on me, I heard a knock on the door. I had not been expecting anyone. When I opened it, I was met with the last person I expected, my husband, Kareem. He stood there in the doorway, looking as he always had, but there was a weariness in his eyes, a vulnerability I had never seen before. His face was gaunt, his clothes disheveled, but it was his eyes that drew me in. They were tired, almost hollow, as if he had been to the very edge of life and had come back changed too. "Ayesha," he said softly, almost pleading, "I've made a mistake. I've been living in darkness and I've dragged you into it. I see it now. I see everything we've been through, and I know I was wrong. I hurt you. I hurt you so much, and I'm sorry. But I want to change. I want to be a better man, a better husband. Please, give me a chance." I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. My heart was heavy with a mix of emotions. There was a part of me that wanted to forgive him, to embrace him as the man I had once loved. But there was another part of me that knew I could not go back. I had walked through hell with him, had endured pain and suffering, and I could not allow myself to be dragged back into that toxic cycle. "Kareem," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was breaking. "I've seen something now, something greater than all of this. I can't go back to the way things were. I've forgiven you, but I have to move forward. I have to walk the path that I've been shown." His face crumpled as though my words were a physical blow, but I stood firm. I had to. The love I had felt in that moment of spiritual awakening was not just a love for myself. It was a love that encompassed everyone. It was a love that I had to protect, that I had to honor. But I could no longer allow myself to be part of a relationship that dragged me down, that kept me in a state of pain and suffering. I had to let go. He left that night, and I never saw him again. Days turned into weeks, and the isolation I feared became a constant companion. I had lost so much, my family, my community, the man I had once loved. But with each passing day, I felt a growing sense of peace. It was not a peace born from the absence of struggle, but from the deep conviction that I was walking in the truth. I had been shown the light, and that light would carry me through whatever came next. It wasn't long before I received a call from Fatima. Her voice was warm and comforting, like a lifeline in the midst of my loneliness. "Ayesha," she said, "I've been thinking about you. I know it's been hard, but I want you to know that you're not alone. There are others who are walking the same path, and we are here for you." Her words filled me with hope. It was true that I had lost many people in my life, but there were still others who understood, who had walked similar paths and found peace. And that peace was not just for me, it was for all of us. We were connected by something far greater than our differences, and together we could find strength and healing. The road ahead was not easy. There were still days of doubt, days when I questioned my choices, my beliefs, my future. But there was also a quiet assurance, a deep peace that I was on the right path. I was no longer bound by the chains of my past. I had been set free, and so I walked on. Step by step, with faith in my heart and the love of God guiding me, I moved forward. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: I had found the truth, and nothing could take that away from me. The love I had encountered, the love that had transformed me, was not just for me, it was for the whole world. And as I walked this new path, I knew that I was not walking alone. I had found peace, and with that peace, I had found my purpose.